The economic boom of the post-war period benefited the white teenagers of America as much as their parents. These children of the baby boom had expendable incomes from babysitting, mowing lawns, and allowances.
Parents gave their kids money, and kids had opportunities to make money. So they had money to buy records. They had money to buy clothes.
With the use of transistors in radios, music became completely portable. Kids could listen to their music without disturbing parents, and they could listen to it anywhere they wanted, in their bedrooms or on the street.
They had access to an automobile, which was unusual. There were radios in the cars, so all of a sudden this music became the soundtrack for a very large and affluent group of people.
We saw the rise of the youth movies, the biker movies, the beach movies that came out, rock and roll movies, and movies featuring big Hollywood talent like James Dean, Montgomery Clift, and Marlon Brando, people that youth culture were able to relate to and to kind of adopt as their icons and the people that express their values and their sense of society and culture.
Marlon Brando starred in a 1954 film, The Wild One, as the leader of a motorcycle gang. Brando brought a complexity and vulnerability to the character, an angry young man rebelling against social forces he couldn't fully comprehend. As an actor, Brando had already made his mark in the stage and film versions of A Streetcar Named Desire when he starred in another landmark film, On the Waterfront.
I better get you home. There's too many guys around here with only one thing in their mind. Am I going to see you again? What for?
On the Waterfront received the Academy Award for Best Picture, and Brando earned the Best Actor award. His naturalistic acting meshed brilliantly with the film's realistic writing and cinematography to create a character with whom everyday Americans could identify. Brando set the benchmark for those who sought to enter the hallowed ground of teen idols. And he gave teenagers a new uniform to wear: motorcycle jacket, t-shirt, and blue jeans. Of all the actors who admired and emulated Brando, only one achieved icon status of his own: James Dean. His hypnotic, gritty performance of a troubled teenager in Rebel Without a Cause made him an instant star. Dean was the loner who could be tough but tender, an actor whose characters shunned society and cried out for understanding in the same smoldering look or briefly muttered line. His roles epitomized the moodiness, anger, and alienation of his generation, and the desire to break free from mundane existence. Dean made only 2 other films, East of Eden and Giant, before his life ended at the age of 24. On September 30th, 1955, Dean collided with another car when driving his beloved sports car, a Porsche Spyder, on a California road. In contrast to Brando and Dean stood the all-time blonde bombshell Marilyn Monroe. Her innocent, natural, and overt sexuality made her the indisputable sex goddess of the decade. Achieving stardom in 1953 with Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Monroe was adoringly contrary on screen. Innocent one minute, naughty the next, she was always desirable in films like Niagara, Bus Stop, and The 7-Year Itch. Although she longed to be taken seriously as an actress, Marilyn Monroe's legacy rested on roles that lionized her as the American male's favorite sexual fantasy.
The uses and gratifications theory states that audiences aren't passive and don't mindlessly accept whatever they see, which might seem odd if you've ever seen a small child yapping away after a Christmas advert or a Jeremy Kyle viewer baying for blood, but actually makes quite a lot of sense. After all, there's a reason not many academics watch The X Factor, and it's not just that it's strangely menacing, it just doesn't appeal to them. Audiences are not forced to view anything, and can in fact turn their media devices to a setting called off if nothing appeals to them, a scenario which might be familiar to those who remember the time before the stupid virus of the mid-2000s made everyone into dribbling screen slaves. As a functionalist viewpoint, the uses and gratifications model believes that the amount of media content available simply means nobody is forced to miss out just because they like something strange or unpopular, like professional chess or the Liberal Democrats. The delightfully named McQuail argued in 1972 that there are 4 types of gratification available from the media. First up is diversion, where audiences try and distract from the grey, bland monotony of the day-to-day by immersing themselves in colourful fantasy lands, which will sound familiar if you've ever met a World of Warcraft player, which of course you won't because they're all inside playing Mists of Pandaria right now, nerdy joke. The second one is personal relationships. This is helpfully split into 2 different ways this could apply. Namely, consuming media makes you feel like a part of a community, much like the World of Warcraft players I mentioned earlier, or improving personal relationships with others by discussing media, such as friends round a water cooler discussing which of the 50 indistinguishable musical things they'll be voting for in the latest edition of Simon Cowell's beloved Cash Cow. Personal identity is a third one, helping to confirm your identity and personal tastes. This essentially means people watch things that society deems appropriate for them. For instance, a politics teacher would be assumed to watch Question Time and Newsnight, and a sociology graduate would be assumed to watch Prime Minister's Questions mainly because they have nowhere else to be at midday on a Wednesday. Finally, for McQuail, there's surveillance. Despite the name, this doesn't refer to any Big Brother-style show centred around voyeurism, and instead to a desire to know what's going on in the world, which one would imagine would be filled by watching the news that's required to be broadcast on all terrestrial channels, although from the look of Channel 5 you could be forgiven for thinking this is entirely optional. Moving on, there are a pair of sociologists named Livingston and Boville who found that people, particularly the young, use the media for reasons such as relieving boredom as well as for learning. There's nothing terribly amusing about that though, so I'll get to the next one. LOL. Lowell suggested in 1990 that people use media for a range of reasons, which won't come as a surprise to you since the previous sociologists have all done something similar, but in this case Lowell suggested 5 reasons, which are as follows. Environmental. Using media for background noise and entertainment, though why anyone would want to bake cakes or do DIY to the strains of Jeremy Kyle's rage-filled mob is beyond me. Then there's communication, which essentially means you use television programs and the like to try and incite some form of conversation in the vague hope that it will restore the flagging friendship between you and an acquaintance because no one else will talk to you, or maybe that's just me. Third is affiliation or avoidance, which takes both the previous points to their logical extremes and means that people use media to bond with, or more truthfully, avoid talking to people with whom they don't want to wear out their goodwill. Social learning takes the number 4 spot and means that media helps with decision-making, problem-solving and education. Perhaps the decisions are too often what channel to watch and the problem is whether to stay with it or switch, but the idea that education is available is nice, and not just from poorly made videos for a sociology class. Finally, there's the idea of competence and dominance. Essentially, in an argument, people can use what they see in the media to beat someone within an argument, though not literally, of course, because they might break something. But is it a good theory? Well, we certainly watch TV for a lot of reasons, and the same goes for the internet and radio, and some of us do indeed form our identities around what we watch. However, media wouldn't exist as it does without one magical word: advertising. Media can create needs in audiences, as well as audiences fulfilling needs they already have, and that creates space for all sorts of commercial interest to come and fill the void. What's more, we are not all special snowflakes, no two of whom are alike. We are all, to some degree, products of our environment, and differences between people are often based on social groups as well as individual taste. It also ignores dysfunctional media consumption, such as if the World of Warcraft player I mentioned earlier decided that because of the game he was going to go and practice his sword skills on those who wronged him in real life. There's not yet a causal link between video games and violence, but while it's a possibility, we do need to be careful. So it's a decent theory, but a flawed one. Unfortunately, though, the same could be said for almost all of these theories, so the hunt for the perfect audience model continues.
The cultural theorist Stuart Hall developed the idea of reception theory, and he suggested media texts are encoded and then decoded. In other words, the media texts are encoded by the creators and then decoded by the audience. Reception theory is different to the hypodermic needle and cultivation theory because those audiences are passive and they just accept meaning from media texts. Reception theory suggests that the audience decode the message in one of three ways: dominant, negotiated, and oppositional. So if we start with our mass media message, in this case it's from television, it could be books or radio or the internet, the media text might have an intended message. In this case, oranges are great. This is then interpreted in different ways. There's the dominant reading, which is the intended reading by the media creators. I really do like oranges. So in these terms, it's not much different from cultivation theory or hypodermic needle model. Then there's the negotiated reading. Oranges are okay. I like apples too. I don't like grapefruit though. Then there's the oppositional. But everybody stop going on about oranges. It's also suggested that the way the audience reacts is dependent on their cultural background. My mum told me never to trust any brightly coloured fruit. Where I come from, we're always accepting of new ideas and culinary choices. Oranges, what are they? They sound amazing, where can I get one? This is known as an active audience. The audience is given more credit, and it's understood that they may react in different ways. So can we see this happening today? These three are watching Made in Chelsea. Let's study their different responses. Oh, those poor darlings. Will they ever find true love? Man, this is so bad it's good. There's such a bunch of idiots, and you're an idiot. It's so obviously scripted. So you're both idiots. Can we watch something else, please? So that's reception theory. The audience has different responses dependent on their cultural background.
Welcome to Media in Minutes, where I talk you through important concepts in media and communication. Ever been told that television's going to rot your brain? Or that violent video games will turn you into a homicidal maniac? These are just a few of the accusations that have been levelled at the media in a frenzy generated by a moral panic. So what is a moral panic? It's basically any widespread anxiety about an issue that's said to threaten the very fabric of society. Moral panics often occur around forms of media technology. It seems that people are deeply suspicious of new media. Writer Douglas Adams put it best when he said that anything invented after you're 35 is against the natural order of things. The next time you read about the dangers of social networking or how video games are making us violent, ask yourself whether it's a legitimate story about the effect of new media or it's just another moral panic.
Royals on the first page, swine flu and road rage. Find Maddie, foreign baddie, put him in a big cage. Bureaucratic red tape, Facebook gang rape. Gordon out, Dave in before the country caves in. Ian Huntley gets his own jacuzzi and a gym in jail. It's absolutely true because I read it in the Daily Mail. Poles paid to give blood, immigration like a flood, soft touch, British Isles, cancer from your mobiles, cancer from your laptop, cancer from your root crop, cancer from your shoes, from your dog, from your pen top, immigrants arriving on an unprecedented scale. It's got to be the case if it's written in the Daily Mail. They never mince their words in the good old Daily Mail. It's absolutely true, because I gather all my views from the Daily Mail.
The Daily Mail Online, the world's most popular newspaper website, recently published this picture.
Is that a paparazzi snap? You think that's done with consent?
I mean, it looks like it was taken on an iPhone.
As it explains, she's 14, posing in her bathing suit. As she dangled her legs into the pool, she leaned back on her arms while displaying her equally trim figure. She's 14.
That's awful.
I mean, they do it all the time, Mail Online.
Oh, the sidebar of shame.
Yeah.
There isn't a single story there on the right-hand side that isn't about a woman that isn't commenting on what she looks like. You're either too fat, too thin, too many children, not enough children. There is no, and then they say, oh, the women can't have it all. No, because you constantly bloody tell us we can't have it all. Some of us are perfectly happy and having a wonderful life, thanks.
But here's another thing. Someone pointed out to me an experiment you can do with Mail Online, which is if you put in quotes the phrase "all grown up," if you put that in quotes in the search bar, then all you'll get is stories about young girls hitting their 16th birthday, accompanied usually by a photograph. It's like a dog whistle for you are now allowed to lech over this girl.
The one ray of sunshine in this entire story is that no one will ever need or want to do Jimmy Savile impressions again.
Well, taking on the Daily Mail is a pretty rough task, but there is a man who's survived it, and you've been talking to him.
Yes, I have. The Labour peer, Lord Sugar, won a libel action against the Daily Mail more than a decade ago, and actually was awarded £100,000 in damages. So there's no love lost between Lord Sugar and the Daily Mail. And when I went to speak to him about the newspaper's attack on Mr. Miliband Sr., the Apprentice boss made it pretty clear what he wanted to say was, Paul Dacre, you're fired. I asked him first why he was so hostile towards the paper.
They are a special ilk of people that work at the Daily Mail. They're nasty, nasty people. And it starts at the top with this Paul Dacre guy who has gone too far this time. And I think the shareholders of the Daily Mail Group have got to demand his resignation.
What would you say is the role of advertisers in all of this? There's been some suggestions of a boycott. What do you think about that?
Well, advertisers, of course, are the lifeblood of the Daily Mail, as they are for any other newspaper, and it's entirely up to them to take a moral stance on this. And I would urge them, just as a punishment to them, to actually pull their advertising next week and the week after, just perhaps temporarily, just to show them what would happen. Let them stand up and show them what would happen if their revenue, which is really all they're interested in, is taken away from them.
This is the idea that the mass media injects thoughts, values, beliefs into the audience. And by doing that, it influences them and maybe changes their opinions. It suggests that the media is very powerful and controlling. The media injects its message straight into a passive audience. This idea came from media theorists, particularly looking at propaganda texts from World War I. This World War I poster shows the Germans to be these detestable beasts. The studies continued into the Second World War, and here's another poster which shows Nazi propaganda. You can see it shows the Jews as evil and sinister people. It seems really simple by today's standards with our media, but it was still considered a very powerful tool. Because if the media can affect people like that, then it could sway wars, sway opinions, make people do things. Now this theory has been criticised greatly, although we can still see examples of it happening today. Just look at advertising. Advertising used to be just simply showing the product, what it does, and what it can offer you.
Here is the new Band-Aid plastic strip with new Super Stick. It sticks better than any other bandage. The proof? Take a dry egg at room temperature. Touch the egg with any other bandage. Brand X, brand Y, brand Z. Not one sticks. But a Band-Aid plastic strip with new Super Stick sticks tight instantly.
Then it suddenly became more. It became about aspirations and associations. Look at Red Bull's advertising campaigns. They take these people who do these amazing stunts and tricks and they just put their logo simply onto their equipment. Suddenly, Red Bull becomes associated with these amazing tricks and stunts. They become cool just by associating themselves with those incredible stunts. Levi Jeans had an amazing advert in the mid-80s. People went crazy after watching this advert. Sales of Levi jeans shot up by 800%. This advert struck a chord with the young people of that time. He was a rebel without a cause, didn't care what the rest of society thought. Consumers wrote in their thousands to get a signed poster of this guy. And with this increase in sales, they had to take Levi's off the shelves because they couldn't produce them fast enough. The really crazy thing is that boxer short sales went up as well. This was strange because they weren't really the thing to wear in those days. And the only reason they put Nick Cayman in the boxer shorts is because they couldn't get away with putting him in a pair of briefs. This ad got everything right. This cool looking guy, all the girls love him, takes his clothes off because he just doesn't care. The ad was telling people, buy Levi jeans and you can be like this guy. This is the classic aspirational model, a phrase often used apparently in advertising. You don't say anything about the merits of the product, you just say what sort of lifestyle it offers. And then by buying that product, you are buying that lifestyle, and wearing those clothes, wearing those items, somehow makes you cool through association. So that's the hypodermic needle model. It is criticised widely today, but you can see that the media does affect people. Cultivation theory was developed by George Gerbner, and he and his colleagues looked at how television might influence people. Cultivation theorists argue that television has gradual, long-term effects, but they're small and over time. Unlike the hypodermic needle model, which doesn't really give any time period. They also argue that these changes aren't actually changes, they just reinforce the norms. Gerbner argued that the people who watch a lot of television are more likely to be influenced. So basically the theory is like this. First, let's remind ourselves of the hypodermic needle theory. Get an ordinary person with ordinary opinions, they watch or listen to the mass media, and it affects their opinions. In this case, the person really likes oranges, but the mass media suggests you should like apples. So with the help of the mass media, he likes apples instead. That's hypodermic needle theory. However, cultivation theory is slightly different. Gerbner argued that this happens over time and with lots of television viewing, and argued that it only reinforced that person's opinion rather than changing it. So here's our guy again who really likes oranges. And the media are only reinforcing that opinion that oranges are great. He now really likes oranges. Rather than changing his opinion, they've reinforced it. One experiment got a group of college students to watch a lot of television, and another group just to watch a little. The ones that were watching a lot of television, particularly action and adventure programs, were indeed found to be more fearful of life in the everyday world than the ones who were watching less television. This showed that television over time was having a slight effect on those students. Now, cultivation theorists generally looked at violence on television. Other people have looked at other aspects of this effect, thinking whether it applies to gender roles, or age, or ethnicity. Another study of American college students showed that those that watched a lot of soap operas compared to those that didn't were far more likely to overestimate the amount of divorces or abortions. Cultivation theory has been criticised. Many people think it's far too simplistic. It doesn't take into account the person's experience or cultural background. Again, the audience is passive. It might be fair to think that cultivation theory doesn't really happen today, because there's so many different channels and different choices out there, and so many different types of media. The mass media is definitely changing, but consider this. Let's take a person who doesn't really like immigrants. He thinks they're coming into the country and taking all the jobs. He would probably want to read a newspaper that agrees with him, and read stories that back up his opinion. And although there might be other newspapers out there that give a wider opinion on the immigration debate, he still wants to read that one paper. He'd prefer to read a paper that backs up his own opinion. This person might then develop a distorted opinion on the issues surrounding immigration. And people do tend to stick with what they know and watch and read media that backs up their own opinions. So that's cultivation theory. The mass media has gradual effects. They can be small. They don't necessarily change opinion, but they can reinforce it.